Welcome to the Traveling Flaneur podcast, where I'll talk about the economy, politics, history, and culture of the places I've visited. I'll also give you travel tips, recommend places to visit, things to do, and the best food. The life of a flaneur is that of an observer, a person who wanders aimlessly with eyes always open to any opportunity. It is a person who is in no hurry and prefers the journey over the destination. I believe that in this hurried world we live in, we need more flaneurs, and I hope you enjoy the perspective from a traveling flaneur and maybe become one in your next trip. Hi, and welcome to Ottawa. Ottawa is the real capital of Canada, and here is where you have the Canadian Parliament and all foreign ministries and embassies. The Prime Minister lives in this city. But many people don't usually visit Ottawa because this is a city that is less touristy than other cities that are in Canada. But I really liked it, and I do recommend visiting Ottawa because I believe this is the best city for museums in the entire country. Additionally, this is a city that you can explore very quickly, and it has a lot of history, culture, and natural beauty, so I definitely think it's worth going. What I would suggest is that you visit the city while you're visiting some other cities. For example, you can combine this city into other trips that you're doing through the eastern cities in Canada. So when you're visiting Toronto, you might as well take some days to visit Ottawa, or same if you're visiting all of the Quebec region. So let's start explaining a little bit how Ottawa works and why this city is very particular. And the first thing is that it's going to span in two provinces, Quebec and Ontario. And because of this, this is going to be a bilingual city where you speak both English and French. It is a fairly small city with a population of around 1 million inhabitants, and this is going to make it the fifth largest city in all of Canada. When I went, I stayed there for 2 days. But if I'm honest, I would have probably preferred staying 2 days and a half or something like that because almost always the day that you leave or arrive to the city, you are a bit rushed. So sleeping 2 nights in Ottawa, I think would be the perfect amount of time to explore everything without too much hurry. When I went, I only stayed there for 1 night, so I arrived in the morning, explored everything, stayed, then tried exploring some things the other day and left. So that was a bit rushed, if I could, I would have stayed 2 nights, and that would make it enough. Ottawa, also, one good thing is that it will be much cheaper to visit than other Canadian cities, precisely because it is not very touristy. I stayed at a hotel in the downtown area, and it was very convenient because I could walk everywhere. So, I would recommend also staying near the Byward Market or the Parliament because if you stay over here, you're going to be walking distance from all of the important places. If you're wondering how to get there, when I went, I took a bus from Toronto, but you could also arrive by train, plane, rent a car, and drive. Basically, you get many options. If you go by car or bus, it will take you approximately like 5 hours, and there are quite a few companies that you can take for getting there, and it won't be expensive. When I bought my ticket, I did it with a little bit of time in advance to ensure that I would get good prices and also that I would get a seat, and it cost me around $50 from Toronto to Ottawa, and this was a bit cheaper than the train, and that's why I chose this option. Now, if I go into all of the things that you can do in Ottawa, the first and most important of one is going to be visiting its major attraction in the city, which is the Parliament. This majestic building, with its iconic Peace Tower, offers several guided tours where you can learn about the country's political history. You can take many tours at the Parliament for free, but you must book them in advance, and they're going to ask you for some information for security reasons, but I think all of these tours are worth it. When I went the first time, I didn't have enough time to visit it, but I know you can do three different types of tour. The first one is going to be the Senate tour, which is going to last for 30 minutes. And then you can also take the East Hall tour and the West Hall tour, and both of these ones are going to last for 40 minutes. If you don't want to do the tours or you don't have enough time, still, I think you should go and visit because the facade is going to be beautiful and it has a monument in the center that's called the Sentinel Flame. And this, well, it's a flame, as the name says it, but it's going to be lit up all year round, rain or shine, so it's also pretty cool to watch. After the Parliament, which is the most important thing in Ottawa, you can start walking along Wellington Street, which is the heart of the city. Here, you will find other attractions and important buildings are going to be located. If you walk to the west, you'll arrive to Sparks Street, which is a pedestrian street that's known for its street art. Or if you walk in the other direction to the east, you're going to reach the National War Monument, which pays tribute to all the Canadians who have served in the armed forces. And also next to it, you'll find the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier for all the fallen soldiers that have fallen in war. If you then continue walking through the street, you'll reach the Rideau Canal, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's a perfect place for enjoying a walk. During the winter, this is going to become the world's largest skating ring. But if you also visiting in the summer, it's worth visiting because you can rent a bicycle, a kayak, or explore only by walking all of the beautiful surroundings. There's also a bridge where you can put the locks for all the lovers. And then my next recommendation would be visiting the Byward Market. This popular market is going to be the ideal place to walk and explore all of the restaurants in the area. And you'll also find crafts or fresh products. So, this is the most active neighborhood in the entire city. And here you're going to find a big Ottawa sign where you can take the photo. So, I really, really recommend it. And walking through this entire area like a flaneur is just a very good thing to do. And if you want to try beaver tails, which, as I mentioned in my previous episodes, are going to be the typical dessert in Canada, this is going to be the place to try them because there's a beaver tail shop that's always full, always open. So it's a good option to try this very delicious dessert. Nearby, you'll find that there are two other places that you can visit. One is the Major Hills Park, which is like an oasis in the city center, and it's perfect for resting and getting some very good views of the canal, so it's worth stopping by. Then the second one is going to be the Notre Dame Cathedral of Ottawa. And this is an impressive architectural work that you can't miss. Its exterior and interior, they're both beautiful, and this is a cathedral that's built with Gothic architecture, so it's going to be very tall and very beautiful. In front of Notre Dame, you're going to find the National Gallery of Canada, and this is one of the most important art collections in the country with works by Canadian and international artists. From the indigenous art collections to masterpieces by great painters, I think this museum is going to be a good option if you're an art lover. If I'm honest, I didn't visit it, but just again, because told you at the beginning, I think I was missing time when I visited Ottawa. And well, then if you try to cross that bridge, which is called the Alexandra Bridge, you're going to arrive in Gatineau, which is the part of the city that will belong to the Quebec region. And over here, you'll notice that all of the default street signs are going to now change to French because technically you're now crossing to Quebec. But in this area of Gatineau is going to be one of my favorite museums, which is going to be the Canadian Museum of History. As a fun fact, this museum is the most visited in Canada, and it additionally is one of the oldest institutions in all of Canada, with its origins dating back to 1856. This museum, as the name will suggest, is about the history of Canada, but it will offer a very complete and interesting view of this history. The entrance cost is going to be $23 for adults, but I definitely think it's worth it. If you don't want to pay, still, the museum will have several sections, and there is one open section to the public that's called the Grand Hall. And here you don't need a ticket, you can just walk in and see a huge collection of totems that are going to reflect the cultural heritage of the indigenous people in the Northwest Pacific coast. But then, if you do want to enter and you do want to pay your ticket, once you enter, you'll find several rooms that go into chronological order. So you'll start with the room of all of the indigenous people, or as they call them in Canada, the first people, and then they're going to explain their customs and beliefs. Afterward, if you keep moving through those sections, you'll find the colonization era, which began in the 16th century with the European explorers like Jacques Cartier and Samuel de Champlain, who began to establish settlements of what is now Canada. The French founded the New France while the British were establishing colonies in the Atlantic coast. And something interesting and different from Latin America is that here the colonizers did not initially kill all of the indigenous peoples because they were needing them a little bit. First, because Europeans found that it was very difficult to live in such cold climatic conditions. And second, because they were trading fur with this indigenous people, which became extremely valuable at that time. And I'm going to be talking further about this when I get into Quebec City. But long story short, they loved beaver fur because beaver fur is waterproof. And so it was used in Europe for creating hats or coats. And Europeans didn't have beavers in Europe. And also, they didn't know how to hunt them because this is a North American animal. So they depended on the indigenous people to obtain this fur. And it can be said, of course, they killed people, but not as much as in other colonized areas because they were in a win win relationship. What happened is that later, the colonial war broke out between the British and the French in the 17th and 18th centuries, culminating in the Seven Years' War, which resulted in the cession of the New France to Great Britain in 1763. So, if you want to learn about all of the colonization era in Canada, this is going to be the place. It has lots of history, way more than what I'm describing, and it's very, very fun. Then, afterwards, you're going to pass on to another section, which is going to be the domain of Canada, because in 1867, the provinces of Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia united, and they marked the birth of the Canadian nation, but all of this was where they were still belonging to England. And one weird and fun thing that I learned is that Canada achieved its full independence from England in 1982 after adopting its own constitution and approving the Westminster Statute. So, this is something that I didn't know. I thought that Canada was a very old country, and they are very old. It's just they were still part of the English colonies up till 1982, where they obtained full independence. After you pass on, there's going to be another section afterward that's going to explain all of the modern history, which involves the creation of the flags, the sports, immigration, and all of that, which is also very cool. And in this museum, I think that you could spend hours learning a lot, so it's very, very worthwhile. After you head out of that museum, if you still want to learn more or you're not as tired, the other museum that I highly, highly recommend is going to be the Canadian War Museum. And for me, this is the best museum in Ottawa. It's a must visit when you go if you like history for sure, because this museum is going to offer a deep look into Canadians' military history, and it's going to have an impressive collection that will narrate all of the experiences of the soldiers of Canada throughout the years. The museum building itself is already very cool, but inside you'll find several galleries, just as the other one, and each one is going to be dedicated to different aspects or periods of the Canadian military history. Some of the most popular galleries are, of course, the First World War Gallery, where you can explore life in the trenches as if you were in the movie of 1917. Then you'll also find the Second World War Gallery, which is going to include key events such as the D-Day, the liberation of the Netherlands, and the role of the Canadian Armed Forces in the Atlantic. And you will also find a Cold War Gallery, where you will find Canada's participation in the peacekeeping missions or espionage operations. And there's also another section which is like modern conflicts gallery, if we could say, which is going to feature different wars such as Afghanistan missions or the Rwanda genocide and more. And what I find entertaining about this museum is not that it's really a war museum, but more like a history museum because Canada has been participating in almost all the wars that the US has participated in. And if you know about US history, you will know that they have been in almost every war. So this is going to give you more of a historical tour of global geopolitics and the wars. And additionally, even though this museum sounds a bit harsh, it has a very nice message that is going to be we never forget. Because that's what they want to achieve with this museum is to remember all of these wars, everything that happened, and this way we should be able to avoid all of the wars in the future. And as a fun fact, again, this is going to be the largest and most impressive collection of war artifacts because it has over 500,000 original objects, including tanks, cars, planes, uniforms, weapons. It's a very, very comprehensive thing. So if you're a history geek, this museum will be extremely entertaining, and you could also spend several hours while touring it. Although these were my two favorite museums, Ottawa is a city full of museums. So if you stay even more days than I did, you could go to the Science and Technology Museum, for example, the Nature Museum, the Aviation and Space Museum, the Agriculture and Food Museum, or even the Bytown Museum. If you'd like to learn more about some of these museums, I'm going to drop some of the links in the description where you can take a virtual tour of the museum. So although it doesn't take you everywhere, it's going to be quite comprehensive and it's going to be free, so I really recommend it. If you like this episode, please share it with someone who loves to travel. Give me a comment and a review because this is going to help me tremendously and it motivates me to give you more travel advice. Also, tell me in the comments if you've visited Ottawa and if these tips seemed useful to you, and subscribe because next week we'll continue on our tour of Eastern Canada visiting one of the most popular cities in this region. Have a good trip!